Capitalism is the greatest invention of mankind. If you're a billionaire. If you're not in the top 0.0000001% of people on the planet, then yeah, it kind of sucks. But if you put your nose to the grindstone, work hard, and break your back every single day, you too can die in debt. Welcome to Capitalism Simulator, aka Recettear and Item Shop Tale, a game where you play as a store owner in a typical fantasy RPG setting. Have you ever wondered what goes on in the daily life of that guy who sells you the mysterious drinks that somehow heals all your wounds from a meteor being dropped on your head? Yeah, me neither. But in this game, we'll get all of those wonderful experiences. You play as Recettear, a 14-year-old girl whose father left for some milk and somehow forgot the directions to get back home. Not only was he nice enough to get you some 2% dairy goodness, he also gave you $820,000 worth of debt.
Oh my god.
Well, he must have known that dealing with the agonizing stress of home loans builds character. So, a fairy named Tear tells you that now you have to open up a 7-Eleven to afford your weekly debt payments. Otherwise, you're gonna get real comfortable with sleeping inside of a cardboard box. And just to make things a little more spicy, you've only got 5 weeks to do it. But don't worry, if you don't want the game to end or you're a masochist and you want a more realistic experience, once you beat the game, you can play the survival mode, where the game never ends and the debt just keeps getting larger and larger every single week until you can't pay anymore. The lunatics who made this sadistic game are a Japanese indie game studio called Easy Game Station. These guys are like the Adam and Eve of indie game developers. They've been making stuff since 2001, with some of their earliest work being anime fan games of Azumanga Daioh, a super influential slice-of-life manga anime series by Kiyohiko Azuma that is pretty famous for being the earliest recorded use in human history of the term waifu.
My wife.
I can definitely see the influence that Azumanga Daioh had on the art style of this game. It has that raw, vintage, early 2000s ooh-woo anime art style. Also, tonally, it's very similar to Azumanga Daioh, having a pretty light and silly mood. Because despite owing enough money to make Mr. Beast start to sweat, Recettear is pretty chill. As Recettear, you have to run this store in order to pay a portion of your debt that gets higher every week. It's a completely accurate bill-paying simulator, just in case worrying about paying your bills wasn't enough for you in real life. Customers will come in to buy items, and they will also come in to sell you items that have been passed down in their family from generation to generation, like this candy apple. The core of the gameplay comes from negotiating prices with your customers. Different people, depending on their personalities, will be more or less willing to budge on their prices. Some are easygoing and will give you more money for stuff, while others went to the Pawn Stars School of Negotiation. Now, to sell anything, first, you're gonna need some inventory. Yep, you get to be one of the geniuses buying up all the Charmin Ultra Soft at the beginning of 2020. The local wholesalers only have so much inventory, so once the market and Adventurers Guild run out of stuff, your only way to get more items is to rely on the stuff the customers will sell you. That is, if you don't mind getting your hands dirty. Or at least hiring someone else to get their hands dirty. You can hire adventurers to go into deep, dark dungeons to find items. This is the second half of Recettear's gameplay. Dungeon crawling. During these segments, the game does a 180 kickflip pop shove it, and now it's an action RPG. By finding items in the dungeons, you essentially get free inventory for a small hiring fee for the adventurer you play as. These segments don't really get much more complicated combat-wise than smack a slime in the head with your rusty sword. If you've played any old school Zelda game, you're good to go. The dungeon crawling, it's fine. It can get a little dull, honestly, but not mind-numbingly boring. The biggest problems are the lack of enemy variety and fairly simple randomly generated dungeon layouts. I think the game overall would have been better if it just focused on the shot mechanics. Luckily, you don't have to do any dungeon crawling if you don't want to. You can beat Recettear without going into the dungeon at all. There is a bit of strategy involved with it, but it is definitely possible. Although, I will say, I don't recommend you play the game this way, as you miss out on a ton of the game's story, character interactions, and world building. The shop handling portion of the game is obviously where Recettear shines. By successfully haggling, you increase your merchant level. By increasing your merchant level, you gain access to new abilities. For example, once you reach a certain level, sometimes customers will come in and not know specifically what they want, so you can offer something to them based on their parameters. This can allow you to get rid of some items that no one is asking for. Later, you gain the ability to accept advance orders put in by customers ahead of time. This is a fantastic strategy to offload a bunch of pricier items all at once, as usually the customer will ask for pretty generic things like 2 weapons or 2 rare treasures. This game can get pretty difficult, especially if you don't have a firm grasp of the game's mechanics. And keeping with the theme of brutal reality, getting a game over in Recettear is not just a slap on the wrist. You're going all the way back to day 1, buddy. Or rather day 2. However, the game does something pretty interesting with its game over mechanic. Once you get a game over, the game acts as though the first playthrough was just a dream, and you keep all of your experience and abilities from your last playthrough, meaning you're not completely starting from square one. You also keep all of your items and your store setup, among other things, which makes no sense from a story perspective if the last playthrough was supposed to not have happened. But from a gameplay perspective, hey, I'm not complaining. If you want to succeed in this game, you gotta understand the way the game works. The shop mechanics of this game are surprisingly deep. For example, frequently there will be changes in the market and certain items may increase or decrease in value based on current events or trends in the game's world. This means you have to constantly stay on your toes, buying low and selling high, as well as making sure you have a variety of items stocked so when the time comes, you can cash in on a big upswing in the market. Also, you have to keep in mind your customers' budgets. If a customer asks for an item that's on display, they'll always have enough for it. But if they're not sure what they want, then you have to make sure that the item you're recommending to them isn't gonna blow their wallets to smithereens. But guess what? It gets even more intricate than that, because you also have to take into account your shop's atmosphere. Your store's wallpaper and floor tiles, among other things, will determine the feel of your shop. Recettear turns simple customization into an actual game mechanic as opposed to a simply cosmetic thing. Different vibes will draw in different customers. You can display different items in your store, and this too will affect the aesthetic. If you only have plain Jane stuff on display, then you'll only get the stay-at-home moms in the store. But if you deck out your shop in the latest Gucci slippers and V-Lone jeans, then expect the hype beast to swarm in. All of the different characters that come into your shop are what make this game so endearing. You can also leave the shop and interact with people throughout the town, and some of these guys can even end up becoming recurring cast members that end up working for you as adventurers. Like this broke guy Louie. He's so poor that getting a job at McDonald's might as well be winning the lottery for him. All of these guys are really charming and fun to interact with, and the fact that you can play as them and they can help you earn more money is just icing on the cake. So essentially, the game rewards actually spending time with the people around town and getting invested into the world. And even if the characters are just generic NPCs, they still have some fun conversations that are cool to see. Ultimately, Recettear is a game about community. As the owner of an item shop, customer satisfaction is pretty important. You gotta look out for the people keeping you in business. By giving people good deals, they'll have more money in their pockets, and more money in their pockets means they can buy more expensive things from you, which will increase your profits at the end of the day. By giving deals to your adventurer buddies, you allow them to have better gear for when they go down into the dungeon for you, allowing them to survive longer and get more items for you to sell. It's all one big cycle that promotes running an ethical business. Recettear incentivizes building rapport with your customers and encourages you to actually care about the world. While on the surface, Recettear seems like a game about embracing the evil of capitalism, taking advantage of customers and squeezing them out of every single penny, the true spirit of this game is one of kinship, personal connections, and wholesome collaboration. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, there's a whole playlist of videos just like this one on the left side of the screen. If you want to be notified when I post a new video, then click on the subscribe button and the notification bell. If you'd be so kind, click the like button too before you go, as it really helps the channel grow. Thanks guys, support your local community if you can, and have a good one.